Hey everybody, my name is Tyler Waldrop. Thanks for joining us here at Bama Insider for day 2 of our 20 for 20 series, tackling 20 questions for the upcoming football season. Yesterday we talked about will Tua slide in the draft, so be sure to check that out if you missed it. And today Tony and I are talking about will Najee Harris become Alabama's all-time leading rusher next season. Tony, why don't you kind of set the stage and let people know where Najee is?
Yeah, so this question is a lot closer than you might think. Najee Harris ran for 1,224 yards last season. That was actually the highest total since Derrick Henry won the Heisman in 2015. That mark moved him to number 15 on Alabama's all-time rushing list. He currently has 2,377 yards. The interesting thing, though, is he's only 1,214 yards away from Derrick Henry's mark of 3,591 yards. And I know that's a lot of yards to throw at you right now, a lot of numbers. So basically, it comes down to this. Najee Harris, if he runs for 10 yards less than he did last season, he will equal Derrick Henry's mark of 3,591 yards.
So I think that's like a good way to frame it. It's a simple way. It helps me kind of wrap my head around it.
Sure.
Basically, if Najee repeats last season, then
He'll
he's
break
the
it.
leading rusher.
Yes, 100%.
Tony, and you would say he is going to do that or no?
No, he's actually not going to do. That's the sad part. Um, no knock against Najee, but I actually think that last year was kind of like the prime year for him to get his numbers. I think just the way it worked out in Alabama's running back room. I don't know if there was as much competition behind him last year, and there will be this year. So I think, you might see Najee Harris get higher yards per carry this year, but I don't think he's going to get the carries that he'll need to reach that number. That I think it's 12-14 is the number he needs to make, 1,214 yards. I think he's going to come closer to around the 1,000-yard mark.
And a lot of your doubts with Najee being able to repeat his success as far as just total yards rushing, that's because of Trey Sanders.
Right. I think, Trey Sanders, you're also looking at improvement between Brian Robinson and Keelan Robinson. So those three behind Najee, I think, are going to provide more competition than what Brian Robinson and Keelan Robinson and then last year's Jerome Ford did last year. I think, I think the real key, like you said, is Trey Sanders and, his ability. I think you could have closer to having two 1,000-yard backs next year instead of having one guy has more than 1,000 yards and other guys that are kind of well below.
Okay, so I could make counter arguments for this all day. Let's start off and say Keelan Robinson is not going to be a factor. I don't think he's going to cut into Najee's workload at all. I think Trey Sanders might steal all of Keelan's carries. But I
Okay,
mean,
so even if he does, so if it's just if we're only taking Trey Sanders, I think that's the reason why Najee won't reach this mark. I think last year was such a perfect storm for Najee that even Trey Sanders coming in, I think that would be enough to have him have, and I don't even want to say a worse season, a less total yardage season, because I don't even know if it'll be less productive. I think, I think there's a lot of things Najee can do with less carries. He can still be good. I just, in terms of total yards, I think it'll be a down season in that term.
so for full transparency, I've been on staff for now a little over 2 months, and I think Tony and I have had this debate at least 6 times already. But I absolutely think Najee Harris is going to be Alabama's all-time leading rusher when everything is said and done. He carried the ball 20 times against A&M, and then in the last 8 games of the season, he averaged 19.7 carries a game. So he was averaging 20 carries. He never carried the ball more than 14 times before he did against A&M. I think Alabama and maybe Najee Harris himself kind of saw something there. And you could say it was a perfect storm, and he took advantage of all these opportunities.
I could be
But
right.
I would argue instead Alabama finally found the Najee Harris they expected to have this whole time. And maybe that Najee Harris needs 16, 18 carries a game.
I don't think that Najee Harris is going to get it. So if he does need it, he needs to change his approach, because I think Alabama is going to do whatever's best for Alabama. And if having Trey Sanders on the roster, I think you're going to want to get him involved in the offense as well. So I actually don't buy into this. Is a popular, I guess, theory that Najee needs 20 carries a game to be the back that we saw late in the season. I don't necessarily think that that's accurate. I think maybe getting a high volume of carries helped him out and it helped him reach to the level he's at. But I think that that's more about experience and more about him, kind of figuring himself out as a runner. I think now you're going to see a more mature Najee Harris that will be able to run at the same production level he did at 20 carries at maybe like 15 or 14 carries a game. And I think, I would argue that I wouldn't be surprised if his yards per carry, like I said, goes up, even if his total yards goes down.
So, yeah, I agree that could definitely happen. None of us have seen Trey Sanders, really give it a go at this level just because of when the injury happened. So, I mean, if Trey Sanders is as good as advertised, maybe. But I'm just currently, if I have to, pick a side right now, I have to believe the numbers suggest Najee does need that, or at least did. That Najee needed that level of production to be that dominant. And I think Alabama wants, especially with what we believe is either Mac Jones or an even more inexperienced quarterback, I think Alabama's going to run the ball a little more too this year. And I think all signs point to Najee getting a similar workload.
If I was making your argument, I think the counterpoint that I would, that I maybe go at is what you just said, is the fact that Alabama could run the ball more. If Mac Jones struggles, or if Bryce Young comes in and he struggles, or they want to take some of the burden off of one of those quarterbacks and they run the ball more, then you could still see, perhaps just more carries per game, which would allow Chase Sanders to get into the game, and then also see Najee keep up his numbers from last year. That's running the ball a lot. The thing about that is I just actually don't see Alabama's passing game. I don't think Alabama's going to be transformed as an offense. I think it worked last year and it's going to work this year. I mean, look, we saw what the offense looked like without Tua in the Citrus Bowl, and it wasn't run happy. It was, pretty, I think Mac Jones had 335 yards and 25 pass attempts. So that kind of worked for Alabama. And I think that that's basically what the offense is going to look like, more or less.
I agree. Najee Harris carried the ball about 20 times a game. I think that it will look a
right.
lot like last year.
Yeah. Okay. No, I'm talking about from a passing standpoint. I still think you're going to get Mac Jones to have about 25 pass attempts. And, I haven't really broken down how many plays per game, how that all figures out. But I don't necessarily think you're going to go back to the 08, 09 Alabama teams where it was just running the ball and having a game manager at quarterback. I think the team's going to trust either Mac Jones or Bryce Young to manage the same kind of high-powered offense. So there'll be a lot of throwing, a lot of slant routes. It's not just going to be a ground and pound game. And I think with all the running backs Alabama has, it's going to be closer to what they had when they had Damian Harris and Josh Jacobs and Najee Harris. It's going to be a lot closer to that bunch than it was to the bunch from this past year.
So here's the last sort of point that I'll kind of get in, and you let me know what you think. Alabama played 13 games last year. So if the football season goes on as scheduled, Alabama could be playing 14 games, 15 games. You're talking about if Alabama's in the SEC championship, Alabama's playing at least 14 games with the postseason. And then if Alabama's in the playoffs and makes the championship game, then that's potentially 15 games. So 2 extra games. Does that maybe make a difference in how you feel about if Najee gets there?
Yeah, I think I've been looking at this at a 13 game, and I actually haven't been thinking about that. So, yeah, the chance that if Alabama goes potentially to a national championship game, that could put them at 15 because you'd have the SEC championship game plus the extra playoff game as well. So, yeah, at that point, then maybe the carries start making up for themselves. You got to think maybe in those kind of games, if Najee's hot, it's not so much about sharing or managing a workload. It's just, a do or die scenarios. So maybe, you saw like Bo Scarborough kind of took over the playoffs in 2017. You could see maybe something like that if he just gets hot and really taking it over. So that's an argument I think I'll give you right there. If there's an extended amount of games, I think, it's going to be close. I don't think Najee's going to drop off 500 yards from last season. I just think he'll probably drop off around 200. So maybe if you added 2 more games into that slot, we're right up there and it could be close.
Just to be fair, I'll throw myself on the limb. I think Najee will get it done in 13. So
Okay. All right. Yeah, that makes
I'll
it a lot more fair.
for the record, I'll throw myself out there and I'll say 13. I think Najee's getting it, but I have zero doubts as long as he's healthy and makes it through the season intact. I think Najee Harris has got it if Alabama can extend the season and get him those 15 games. Even if you're right about Trey Sanders cutting the workload, I think 15 games. I think he's got it.
Yeah, and you know what? I mean, it'd be great for him too because I think a lot of people thought, oh, why did he come back? Well, this would be a really great way to end your Alabama career. That's a lot, a large, an elite, company that he's with. I mean, it's more than Derek, it's more than Sean Alexander, it's more than Mark Ingram. I mean, these are some huge backs that he'd be passing. So, yeah, I think that'd be a big deal, big accomplishment for him, and certainly a talented enough back. I don't think anyone's arguing he has the talent to do this. It's just the opportunity and how that will present
Oh
itself.
yeah, and it's a record that'll probably stand for a while. It's hard to see anyone on that's going to be on the roster next year passing it.
Yeah, I think, at least for the short term, so many of these records. So, I mean, if you look at it, Najee's at 15th right now. So he's not even in the top 10.
Mm-hmm.
And we're talking about him beating a record for number one. So there's obviously 14 other backs that have done something similar. I think it's all going to come down to, it's kind of got to be a perfect storm. I think in Najee's case, it would be, did you get enough playing time early in your career, and are you willing to stay around as a senior? Because that's really what you
True.
need, unless you're going to have some kind of crazy season like Derrick Henry had.
Yeah.
Because if Najee Harris would have left for the NFL, he wouldn't even be close to this discussion. So perhaps we get a back that comes in to Alabama in his first season, runs for 800 yards and manages, to keep on doing that throughout his 4-year career. I think, at that point he would break it. So
yeah, absolutely. You're right. Rare does Alabama have a back that's had this success, that's had this much volume actually come back and play senior year. Or if they are playing as a senior, they weren't as involved as early as Najee was, maybe. So, yeah, that's right. I think that's a good place to end it. I think we, we'll see. 13 games into Alabama's season. We'll see if I'm right or not. But I feel pretty good about this one.
It'll be fine.
Okay. Thank y'all for joining us, and definitely, comment and tell us if you like these videos. Tell us if you like the series. Tell us how much you disagree with what Tony just said, and tune in tomorrow for our next series or number 3.
Number 3.